They say Musashi won more than 60 duels, but what they rarely say is this: none of those victories were born from anger. Not a single strike was tainted with rage. Not a single movement came from hatred. Because Musashi understood a truth most modern men never touch. Anger is loud. Power is silent. Before he became a legend, he was a restless boy carrying storms inside him. Storms he mistook for strength. He swung his first wooden sword not to learn, but to release the fire eating him from within. Yet every time he fought from fury, he lost a little more control. Until he realized control was the real battlefield. And so began his transformation. Not through violence, but through emptiness. Not through dominance, but through discipline. Not through victory, but through self-mastery. While other warriors sharpened their blades, he sharpened his breath. While others chased applause, he carved away ego. While others fought to be seen, he fought to be still. It wasn't the sword that made Musashi invincible. It was the absence of fury behind it. This is the path he walked. A path of patience, presence, and a power that speaks only in whispers. And if something in you stirs at this quiet strength, stay. Your spirit may be remembering a path it once knew. Before Musashi ever held a real blade, he carried a storm inside him. A wildfire that no one taught him to understand. He swung wooden swords like a boy trying to outrun his own shadow, mistaking chaos for courage. The villagers whispered that his temper was a sign of power. Musashi believed them, and so he chased every confrontation he could find, letting rage pull him forward like a red thread tied to his throat. In one of those early brawls, something strange happened. In the middle of his fury, his vision blurred. His breath broke, his strike missed by the width of a hair. For the first time, he felt fear not of losing, but of losing control. And that was the exact moment a wandering monk stepped from the trees, as if he had been watching far longer than Musashi realized. The monk's robes were torn at the edges, the color faded by sun and rain, yet his presence felt heavier than steel. He didn't scold Musashi. He didn't question him. He only looked at the boy's shaking hands, then at the dirt where his sword had fallen, and said quietly, "A man ruled by anger is already defeated." Musashi felt the words enter him like a blade pressed, not into the body, but into the truth he avoided. He wanted to shout back, to deny, to prove the old man wrong, but the monk's eyes were still. Painfully still. They held no judgment, only a reflection, like a locked drawer inside Musashi opening for the first time, revealing something he was not ready to see. The monk turned and walked toward the mountains without another word. Musashi hesitated, then followed, pretending he wasn't following. But deep down, something had already begun to break, and something else was quietly trying to be born. The mountains greeted Musashi with a silence he did not trust. It was too large, too calm, too unbothered by the noise inside him. The monk led him to a small hut built beside a stream, its wooden door cracked like an old secret, its floor covered in burned incense ash, as if countless men before him had tried to find themselves here and failed. The training began not with sword drills, but with sitting. Hours of sitting. Motionless, breath slow, eyes lowered. For a boy raised on conflict, stillness felt like suffocation. The silence pressed against him like a mirror he couldn't escape. Every memory he tried to outrun resurfaced. Every insult, every loss, every moment he'd felt unseen. The monk didn't comfort him. He only said, "This is your ego screaming. Listen, but do not obey." Inside Musashi, something cracked, softly, like thin ice under a single step. Days blurred into each other, marked only by the rising sun and the quiet flicker of the monk's lantern at dusk. Meditation deepened into fasting. Fasting deepened into long walks where Musashi was forbidden to speak. forced instead to watch the way leaves fell without hesitation, how water flowed without anger, how the world moved without ever needing to prove itself. This silence became a mirror he could no longer look away from. He saw his ego clearly now, a restless creature clawing for validation. Every time a painful memory rose, the monk whispered, "Let it burn." And in the ashes of those memories, Musashi felt something unfamiliar, a presence that did not react, only observed. It frightened him more than any opponent ever had, because this strength wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, unshakable, impossible to intimidate. And deep inside, Musashi knew he was standing at the threshold of something irreversible, something he could never return from. Word of Musashi's stillness spread faster than he expected. Whispers in nearby towns spoke of the boy who no longer burns, as if the absence of anger itself were some forbidden truth. So when a renowned swordsman sent a challenge, Musashi understood. This was not just a duel. This was a test of who he had become. The field where they met was quiet, covered in morning mist. His opponent arrived confident, almost amused. "Where is the fire you're known for?" he asked, tapping the blade against his shoulder. Musashi didn't answer. He only breathed, slow, steady, unshaken. A strange tension filled the air, like a locked drawer about to open. The opponent mistook Musashi's calm for fear. He lunged first, fast and arrogant. But Musashi moved like water slipping through a broken vessel. No aggression, no hesitation, no noise. Only clarity. In that instant, something irreversible shifted. Their blades met only once. A single clash, clean, sharp, without fury. Musashi's strike was not stronger. It was simply truer. Born not from emotion, but from presence. His opponent staggered, breath caught in his throat, as if struck not by steel, but by the realization that something far more dangerous than anger had entered the field. He dropped to one knee, eyes wide, whispering, "You weren't even angry." Musashi looked at him quietly. There was no triumph in his face, no pride, no hunger for recognition. Only a calm acceptance, like he had merely stepped through a door he was always meant to find. And in that moment, Musashi finally understood. He was no longer fighting other men. He was fighting moments, conditions, circumstances, and the war was happening entirely within. But what came next would demand a mastery even silence could not prepare him for. As Musashi's reputation grew, something inside him grew uneasy. He watched other warriors chase duels the way greedy men chase gold. Hungry, loud, desperate to be seen. Their swords flashed, but their spirits trembled. Their victories were just burned ledgers of ego, won today, forgotten tomorrow. So Musashi turned away from the noise. He began studying calligraphy, tracing quiet strokes across parchment until each line felt like breath made visible. He carved wooden figures late into the night, noticing how a single mistake revealed the impatience of the hand. He wrote poems that sounded more like confessions than art. And through all of it, a realization formed. Every discipline, every art was teaching the same lesson. Stillness, presence, a mind that did not shake. He started training without his blade, forcing his body to move, guided only by awareness, not instinct or aggression. And something shifted, subtle and unsettling. At first, fighting without a sword felt like stepping into a battlefield naked. But soon, Musashi noticed a strange truth. When the weapon was gone, his attention became the blade. Sharper, quicker, untouched by fear. This was the beginning of his no-sword philosophy, a path where technique mattered less than the spirit that directed it. He learned to sense the weight of intention before a strike was even thrown, to read the tremor in a man's breathing before his feet moved. Battles stopped feeling like clashes of steel and became something quieter, almost mathematical. The monk once told him, A sword is only as pure as the hand that holds it. Now Musashi finally understood. Mastery lived not in the weapon, but in the unshakable mind behind it. Yet the deeper he walked this path, the more he sensed a looming test. One that would not be won with presence alone. There came a season when Musashi no longer needed to lift his sword to win. His mere presence changed the air around him, like a still lake that reveals the truth of whatever comes near. Warriors who once boasted about defeating him now hesitated to even approach, not out of fear of violence, but fear of being seen by someone they could no longer shake. Insults slid off him like rain against stone. Threats dissolved before they reached his ears. Challenges arrived like letters he never bothered to open, sealed, forgotten, irrelevant. People whispered that Musashi had crossed into a strange territory, a place only a few warriors ever reached. The realm where provocation dies before it is born. In villages he passed, mothers pulled their children close, not to protect them from him, but to keep them quiet in the presence of a man who reacted to nothing. A man whose silence felt like an ancient warning carved into earth. And yet, this was only the surface of the transformation. The deeper truth revealed itself one evening when a young student approached him, a boy trembling with the same fire Musashi once carried. "Master," he whispered, "how do I defeat those who anger me?" Musashi drew a thin red thread in the dirt, its line straight and unbroken. "When someone provokes you," he said, "they want you to step off your path. But power," he tapped the thread gently, "is staying here." The boy frowned. "And if they refuse to stop?" Musashi smiled, a quiet, ancient smile. "Then you let them burn their own house down, and you watch the smoke without inhaling it." In that moment, the boy understood. And Musashi felt the last piece of his own ego loosen, like a locked drawer finally opening on its own. That night, Musashi walked alone into the dark forest, the silence following him like a loyal shadow. And something in that silence hinted he was leaving more behind than anyone would ever understand.